Welcome to Creative Courage Chats, a search for a new understanding of creativity and problem solving. I'm Alex Rouff. Hi, everybody. I'm back to doing another Creative Courage Chat, and today, again, I always say this, but this time it's really special. I have a special guest today, but this is Brian Rouff. He's my business partner. We've been working together for about 20 years, 21 years, maybe about 20 years.
It's a fast two decades.
Right. So, yeah. And we've been through thick and thin. We've fought a lot of wars. We've won some. We've lost some.
Mostly thick.
We've bled together. He's my business partner, but I refer to him as my business brother. So, anyway, Brian, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do? And we're not going to talk about business today. We're not going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about something else. We're going to talk about.
For those of you at home, it's late Friday afternoon, and the last thing I want to do right now is talk about business.
Talk about work. We're going to talk about something you love. We're going to talk about writing. So anyway, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, as Alex said, he and I have been business partners. I'm going to get in a plug. What the heck? Imagine Communications for about 20 years. Mm-hmm. And we had met a couple of years prior to that where you did a book cover for me. And we were scheduled to meet. And of course, you forgot the first meeting. And then I thought, I'm never going to see this guy again. I'm done. And then these things happen. And it's been a beautiful thing. So I'm fortunate that writing is the only thing I'm good at. And I've been able to make a living doing it professionally as a PR writer, a journalist. I've written all kinds of marketing and advertising materials. But in middle age, I decided, like many writers do, I'm going to go for the Holy Grail, and I'm going to write a novel in my spare time. So that's led me down a different path. We can talk more about that, but it was one of the better decisions I've ever made.
Well, that's really kind of the path I wanted to go down, because I think that a lot of people say they've got a book in their heads, that they want to write, and everybody carries these, and very few people have the courage or the wherewithal or the time, because everybody says, I don't have the time. They think they need to be in this perfect setting to be able to write a book. And I think you need to be a little scrappy, right? If you want to do something like that, especially the first time.
Well, absolutely. Because first off, that is the myth of the cabin in the woods, that if I just had the time and a place to get away for 3 months and nobody bothering me, I will write the great American novel. Well, first off, that never happens. Okay. So you have to steal the time, but it's a lot more than time. I mean, the hardest part is it's hard. It's a grind. And there's so many traps along the way. And one of the most common ones is you hit the wall, just like what I hear a marathon runner will do. Never tried it. I'm not gonna. But it's the same thing with writing anything long form like a novel. You're going to run out of steam. You're going to run out of ideas for a while and interest about halfway through. And then there's the lure of I've got a better idea. And then, so there are a lot of writers that have 8 or 10 or 12 unpublished manuscripts on their hard drive in a drawer back in the old days. None of them get finished because the better idea is always there lurking behind the scenes. And you've got to just power your way through it. If you can, then that's how you there's nothing more important than finishing, or what Seth Godin refers to as shipping. You have to ship. You gotta finish.
Right.
And then you worry about all the other nonsense that goes along with it.
I that's the part that I think is relatable for a lot of people, or that I imagine would be somewhat relatable for people, is the struggle, that they have with the writing. Like Bradford Salomon was one of the fine artists that I spoke to, and he said, in terms of a quote from a particular artist said, "I'm never done with a painting. They just come and take them from me."
That's great.
And I thought that was pretty cool. But in terms of writing, sometimes, there's this want to rewrite and change, and then you have, and it's such a struggle in your head because you're wrestling with the process and everything. And that's kind of what I was curious about, because I think people that are interested in writing or struggling through these things, which are many people are, one of the things I mentioned to you that I want to talk about to you is a writer has a way of thinking of things. They have to think in terms of being a writer in every moment of their lives. Can you talk a little bit about that? I was observed that in you, where out of the blue, you will do something that'll remind me, oh, he's a writer. Because you'll do something
like I'm jotting something down, probably.
Got something down to keep, for later and stuff like that. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, I guess. But that program is always 24/7 spinning around in your brain, and no matter what you're doing, you're not 100% in the moment, unless you're actually writing. But when you're interacting with people, or you're in a meeting, or whatever's happens to be going on, I could be in a movie, and yet something triggers a thought, and then I've got to jot it down, because the other trap is, oh, I'll remember it later. Well, you never remember it later, and then for the rest of your life, you're thinking, the greatest idea I ever had, I didn't write down.
Right. You're right.
So I still do it the old-fashioned way. I know that people will speak into their phones and record digitally or whatever. I've heard a rumor about that. I don't trust it. I write it down. I put it in a old-fashioned folder. Seems to have served me well. But I tell you what, this can get you in all kinds of trouble. I mean, I could be theoretically fighting with my wife. Like, that would never happen. But if it did,
yeah,
there's a possibility that there's something so great about the fight that part of me is disconnected from it. And I'm thinking, this is
going to make her so happy.
I'm so happy. And she can tell too after all this time. She says, you're checked out, aren't you? So, but you don't want to lose that either, because it could make a great scene.
Right.
So you can lose friends because maybe somebody thought that you based a character on them. And, and then if you say, no, it's not, then they're offended because you didn't. So you can't win either way. But go ahead.
Well, it's in, this is real. I don't want to, like you said, I don't have a pencil to write this down, but I don't want to miss this portion of what you're talking about.
But apparently we're recording this, so I think we'll be okay.
No, but I want to ask it now. I don't want to go back and rewind.
No.
Okay. Well, anyway, is that in terms of that, and a way of thinking of things. So you said you heard something that was interesting enough for you to write it down. But what's funny is, I think that this happens all the time. I think that when people in normal life, they see something and it makes them go, oh, I like that, or that, ooh, that's interesting. And then you move on. And we have like thousands and thousands of moments in our lives where we go, ooh, that's cool. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's intriguing to me. And then we just let them go. And and I think that that's such valuable content. Now, there's remnants of that and feelings that we have, and we carry those with us. And then when we start acting, and if you're writing, you're drawing from those feelings rather than those actual detailed moments that were captured wholly, And I think that that's kind of the interesting side of this, is like we're always taking notes. It's a matter of how clear they are. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think that that's an interesting side of it, and why it's important for people to really write those down, because then they're nice and clear in your head, and it recaptures what you were feeling at the time when it happened, right?
Yeah, and that's why we've had great comedians, for example, over the years. You know how much I admire George Carlin.
Yes.
Another wonderful craftsman, of course, is Jerry Seinfeld. Well, they see things, or in the case of George, saw things that we all do, but they stopped and went, wait a minute, that's an interesting observation. Right. That could be funny, There's Carlin, just, one of a zillion things, but this just comes to mind that anybody could see it, but he made something out of it. He said, when you go to the doctor and you see that it's a professional building, he says, do you feel better about things? Just a little tiny nugget, but that's, but you put all those together. So he would do it on stage, and he was a brilliant performer. I'm not that brilliant, and I do it in the form of a book, but they all add up, and every comment and every observation reveals something. It reveals something about the story, about a character. The things I'll jot down could be something I would overhear in a coffee shop
Sure.
back in the day when I would go to a coffee shop. I miss those, by the way.
Right.
Or it could be just a little something like I realized a number of years ago that pretty much every office that I would visit would have a screensaver that had water in it. Even this one has water. And it's because why? We live in the godforsaken desert. So water, you know, if you're sitting in your office
Good
and
point.
you look at the Caribbean, it's going to be relaxing and comforting in some way. So I put that in my last book, just as a little throwaway line, but something where a reader might get a little tiny insight into the way Las Vegas locals think.
Yes. So recently on social media, I posted a line from a book, and I remember, and you made the comment, that's some good writing right there.
Oh yeah.
And I want to read it, and then I want to hear your thoughts on why it's good. Okay,
Sure.
if that's okay. She wasn't doing a thing that I could see, except standing there, leaning on the balcony railing, holding the universe together. And that's by J.D. Salinger.
Yeah, look at that. You can't see, but I got goosebumps even from you just reading that. Not that it was such a great read, but it's such a great line.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
but
it's that final little clause holding the universe together.
yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a description. But now you know what our narrator is thinking.
Right.
That, you know, he's in love with this woman. He worships her. She means everything to him. And instead of saying that, because you don't want to hit it on the, just like with what you do, right? You don't want to hit it on the nose. You don't want to create a piece of art, because it really wouldn't be art, that's just an illustration. You want it to deliver a message that's more than that. And that's what Salinger did just by adding that last little phrase there. And that's what makes it brilliant.
I mean, I agree. I mean, we work in communications, and I think the best kind of communications is when you tell people things they already know in a way that surprises them. You know, it's things that are relatable, things that, you know, even your stories or any book, any story, you have to have a connection with some of the characters or some of the things that are happening, and you need to bring a little bit of that into it. And then even science fiction books, the characters, if they're not relatable, of course you're dealing in outer space, nobody's been out there fighting aliens, but the characters have to have something in them that makes you say, I feel for that person, or I understand where they're coming from. There has to be this connection. And
I believe that wholeheartedly. I'm a character guy. I start with character before I come up with plot or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure that if it's interesting characters, but you as a reader and a writer have to care about them.
Right.
Because you can have the most intricate, wonderful, amazing plot in the world, but if you don't care what happens to the main people in the story, what good is it?
Mm-hmm.
I always say, think back to your favorite books and movies over the years. What is it you remember about them first? You don't really remember the plot, right? You look at To Kill a Mockingbird, right? I mean, Atticus Finch, the cornerstone of that book, became the role model of at least one generation of fathers, of the idealized.
And attorneys.
Was that?
And attorneys.
And attorneys, that's right. We know an attorney who said she became an attorney because of that book, right? So I'm sure there's thousands that did. Right. But it's because we remember the character, even though the story was brilliant. But if you don't have that character as the center of that universe holding things together, it's not going to be the classic that it is.
You know what I really love about art, you know, people like, you know, you and anybody that's an artist that wants to communicate ideas and feelings and things like that, it's because I do believe this, and I know you know that I believe this because I talk about this all the time, but I really do believe there's nothing more important than creativity, literally nothing. Because if you are able to communicate a feeling that people can relate to, and if you can write a line that can give you goosebumps, or you can write a phrase that moves somebody to action, then that's what the point is. That's how things happen. That's how things move forward. Martin Luther King was a communicator who knew how to stir people up, telling them things they already knew, but were holding it deep inside and didn't feel the right way, didn't feel that they had the right to feel these things. And he expressed it in a way that gave them permission to start feeling the things that they had locked up, right? And I think in some way, that's your job as a communicator, is to give out these keys to people.
We are creatures of creativity, no matter which way we choose to channel it.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond a job, I feel like people are obligated, if they have a gift, and we all have a gift in some way,
right?
It's just how we choose to manifest it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do with that gift, you have to do something with it. My all-time pet peeve, even worse than that, I can't think of what the just annoyance is. I've known very many creative people over my life that better writers than I am, you know, better communicators, better whatever, better musicians. They don't do anything with it.
I know.
And it is not only frustrating, they're squandering their talent. And, you know, now, so I feel like they need to marry that to a little bit of ambition, because they need to get that out to people. You know, I feel like these stories that I tell, I have no choice but to tell them. Otherwise, they will torment me and torture me to the day that I die.
Right.
And I know that maybe sounds stupid, but when I'm done, and when I'm doing it, I'm manic. When I'm doing it, I'm writing every day, and I have to write, but that can only go on for 3, 4, 5, 6 months before you're spent. You're just empty. And then it takes a while for the well to replenish. But when I'm done with it, it is the biggest sense of relief more than anything else. It's like this big sigh, you know, and it's like, okay. And I even told my wife on this last one, I'm going to get in a plug. The House Always Wins, a Vegas ghost story. Based on a real house my family and I
lived in. We're going to do more than a plug.
15.
I'm going to have all of your books listed.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Okay. Well, I'm done being, you know, I am a marketing guy at heart too, right? All of us writers need our day job.
No.
I told her so many times, I said, if I die before I finish this book, I'm going to be pissed. I'm going to come back and haunt somebody. I'm going to come back and channel it through somebody, because it's got to be done.
Right.
So what a feeling of just to get that thing done and out. And then, you know, so I'm happy when that happens. And then anybody else that reads it and happens to like it is just bonus. It's nice, but it's not the reason I'm doing it.
It's funny, because I wrote a book. Went through the process of writing a book myself. And one of the things I struggled with was this. It felt like I was on a wagon going downhill without holding the reins sometimes. And it was just charging down this hill. Sure. And I was just trying to use my body to steer the wagon in the direction I wanted to go. Because I had a lot I wanted to say, and I'm just regurgitating all this stuff, not knowing if it's working, and then wondering if I'm wasting my time, and is it worth wasting the time, or is what I'm saying even worth saying? Is what I'm saying even, who am I to think that I can speak on this thing? You know, there's this kind of humility that is so annoying. It's annoying because it doesn't solve any problems. People that are shy and feel like they don't have a right to express something are incredibly wrong. And we are poor because they don't share, because they don't give us some of what they've got. And those of us that kind of have, for whatever reason, the confidence to put our ideas out there, or at least are contributing, right? At least we're helping out with something. And so I was struggling with a lot of that stuff going forward and everything. And it was like one of the hardest things that I've ever done personally, you know, emotionally and everything. And so I kind of get it when the struggle that people go through. But you've written a lot of books, and you've helped a lot of people write books. You've ghostwritten books. That's the other thing that I was like, how do you ghostwrite? It's hard enough to write a book, but to write it for someone totally, you know, that must be so hard. I mean, it's hard to even wrap my brain around doing that. Well, give me first. Let's go down the list. Can you go down the list of the books you've written real quick?
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah.
So, and keep in mind that I didn't even start trying to write my first novel till I was 39 or 40 years old. Although having written for 20 something years before that, but just, so the first one that I just wanted to see if I could even do it. And if I tried and I failed, well, at least I wouldn't have regrets. And I always joke that it's the way I handled my midlife crisis, but it's really true because I was pretty stuck in my career at the time. I owned a small company and it just stopped being fun. And I needed to do something other than get a divorce or buy a Porsche or, join a biker gang or, go back and, be a surfer. So I thought, okay, this is the right time to do this. And the first one, how people always say, where do you get your ideas? Well, ideas are the least of the problem. The ideas are everywhere. So my first one, the first idea came from an ad that ran in, remember Las Vegas City Life? It was a weekly alt publication. I still miss it.
Right.
And they had a really fun classified section in the back. And there was an ad that ran every single week here in Vegas. And it said, I will bring you luck at dice, call Julie. And it just intrigued the hell out of me.
It's so Vegas.
Right? It's so Vegas.
Yeah.
And he ran it every week, which means it must have generated some business because they don't run those ads for free. And I thought, boy, that would be a character to write. And that's when you get back to the whole thing about character. So that was the character that I created of the Dice Angel. And by the way, to get a little hook to feel what Julie was like, I called her. The number was right in the ad. And I actually went out gambling with her, and she was a complete nutcase. And an old hippie who had fried too many brain cells.
Sure.
And but she was a great character, and she became the basis of that book, Dice Angel.
Yeah.
That was the first one. I married that character to my good friend Johnny Mac, which is, for those of you who don't know, Johnny Mac's Bar and Grill is a legendary pizza and wing place out in Old Henderson.
Henderson Special.
Henderson Special. And somewhere DJ Allen is applauding right
yes,
now.
Yes, he is.
Anyway, he's a character in his own right. And we would go there at least once a week for years and years. And I told him, John, one of these days I'm going to write a book about you. And he goes, yeah. So one of the happiest days of my life is when I walked into his place and I had a copy of the book, my first book, and I plopped it on the bar. I said to John, here's your book. And I walked out.
Yeah. That's pretty
and he started selling it. So that was the first one.
Yeah.
And then I took a little.
Oh, and I was connected to that one. I helped you with.
Well, you helped me with the cover for one thing, which I still love, and so did Deb, your wife, because she took the photo of
the photo that we used,
of an angel statue, right, from a New Orleans cemetery.
That's correct. Yeah.
And it's a really nice book cover. Okay. Anyway, that book did really well. It's very Vegas, but from an insider perspective. I also was a gambler in those days. I hadn't been in Vegas nearly as long as I have now. And it took me a while to figure out that if you live here, you can't gamble. So I had all those demons, all those dark, losing streaks. And that was a great thing, not at the time, but it was a great thing to tap into as a writer, to use that emotion and that darkness and infuse Jimmy Delaney, my main character, with that. And that was the reason he connected with the Dice Angel in the first place, because he ran out of options and he had to hook up with this crazy lady to go against his better judgment.
That's an example of writing what you know, right? And the feelings that you have, and you turn them into.
Doubt.
Yeah.
And it's also very cathartic. It can be very therapeutic. And I feel like, in maybe the 9 months or 10 months it took me to write the book, that maybe saved me 9 or 10 years of therapy.
When you're writing, it's not like you're the expert and then you're sharing your expertise with the world, right? It's more like you have an idea, and the process of writing it is almost like you're learning also, aren't you? You're kind of learning through the process of writing.
I don't outline ahead of time. I have a very vague, very general sense of what I'd want to do with it. But the magic of it for me is the process of discovery, what you were just talking about.
Mhm.
That as I'm writing it, I don't really want to know where it's going until I figure it out. And I figure that way it might be more interesting to the reader as well.
Right.
So we're all on this journey together.
This
Plus,
is,
outlining sounds like school.
yeah, it does. There's this beautiful thing I heard once from a cartoonist, and it might have been Burke Braith. I don't know. It might have even been Bill Watterson. That there comes a point when you're a cartoonist and you're writing your characters up that the characters take on the life of their own. They just, it becomes so solidified who they are that you don't have to write stories anymore. You just create an environment, plop them in, and then they start talking.
They'll
And
tell you what to do.
in your head, and you're writing down, and they start telling you what the conversation is. And it's almost like you're just watching on a wall how these characters are.
I see it on the movie screen. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and then you start just capturing it, and you're writing it down. And that is a high level of creativity and a processing of information and a trust to let the characters you've built to follow those things and to follow your gut on these things. That's working at a kind of, it seems like a high level, but it is kind of, isn't it strange? It's hard to describe that, isn't it? It's hard to wrap your brain.
It is. I think everybody's been in it in one way or another. It's the zone, the flow, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
But whether you're a musician or whether you're an athlete, whatever it might be, there are times when your conscious mind gets out of its own way, and then you open up to all the possibilities. And it's a spiritual thing, and you're connecting to stuff you don't even know what it is, and you can't type fast enough to capture everything that's going on. Sometimes a minor character who just makes an appearance for a reason will start tugging on your sleeve and turn out to be a major character, and you can't ignore it. You have to go with it, even if it ultimately turns out to be a dead end. And I think I've rarely had that happen, but you've got to go down that alleyway to see where it takes you.
What a great visual that is that it tugging on your shirt like that, because it's like, that's what it feels like. You could ignore that and just kind of brush it off, or actually stop, just like a kid, just stop and listen. And then the kid tells you something amazing, right?
And they don't stay brushed off. That's just like a kid,
Right.
Or a puppy. You can ignore it for a while and go do your own thing. And then it comes back when your guard is down, and you've got to go with it. I mean, again, that's part of that magic that we don't understand.
Exploring these ideas, and you not having to really know where you're going, but know you should be going there and following that is such a fascinating thing to me, and so important. And it kind of touched on it a little bit in my last interview with Kathleen Ruddy from St. Baldrick's. She's the CEO of St. Baldrick's, and it's a childhood cancer foundation. And she was telling a story, and I'm going to relate it again, even though it happened in the last interview I did. But it was interesting because I think it kind of falls into this, that there was this little boy, and he was he's dealing with cancer, and he was watching people getting their head shaved in solidarity with the kids when they're raising money and they get their head shaved. And then this is an event. And every time somebody would get their head shaved, he would be laughing and cheering and laughing and screaming. And she thought, it's so funny. He thinks it's funny, because he's just laughing hysterically. And she's decided after a while to walk up to him and goes, "What are you laughing at? What's so funny?" And he says, "It's great. This means I get to grow up."
Wow.
And it's interesting to me that you can see a kid laughing and you're assuming that he's laughing because it's silly, because people are getting their heads shaved.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, he grasps exactly what's happening. And he's not coming from a place of sadness because he's a child, and children choose good things. He sees this as a great thing and a hopeful thing. And there was so much power in that story. It was like so much, there was so much to learn. And I think that as writers and as anybody that communicates, we're hunting for those moments, right? Where we can just reveal something to somebody that's what that little phrase was, right? And man, when it happens, isn't that good? It feels so good.
It feels so good. Listen, I've made myself laugh. I've made myself cry, sitting alone in a room, writing, giving myself chills, whatever that might be. And that's
surprise yourself. You surprise yourself sometimes.
That's the best part.
Yeah.
But And in order to do that, and you and I have talked about this a lot, you have to trust the process.
Right.
You know, there's a writing cliche that goes, if you write yourself into it, you can write yourself out of it. And that's what that involves. And sometimes it means that you have to back away for an hour. You know, I always say when all else fails, go to lunch. You know that. Yeah. But whether it's an hour or a day or a week, you know, knowing that your subconscious, which is where this comes from, is tapping into stuff. Whether, you know, that's why we all have to keep a notepad next to the bed on the end table, because we're going to wake up in the middle of the night with the solution.
Right. So that's actually a good practice, right? Is write yourself into a corner, because you should be able to write yourself out. Like Breaking Bad, I always felt they always were constantly writing themselves into a corner, and then they went to bed, and the next day they would figure out how to get out of it.
And it made me nervous as a viewer.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, geez, here we go again.
Get out of it.
Right. But the best part is that the way that they would get Walt out of it was true to the story.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just some thing. It was believable within the character that he would do this. And he was discovering it as we were discovering it together. You know, Bob Dylan would always talk about that, about leaving blanks in his lyrics. He didn't want to make them too clear, and then he would jump around, and then he would go from first person to third person. And he was asked about that, and he said he wants to make the listener a co-creator in his process. I was like, wow. Yeah.
That's cool. I always loved that he said, when asked at an older age, you know, what do you think of these old songs? And he goes, yeah, that's great. I don't know how that guy wrote that.
That's right.
Because he's thinking of himself as a young man. When he's a young man, it was different. He had a lot more courage probably, and he had a lot more, you know, and at an older, he's just not there anymore or something. I like that little way he was looking at it.
I like it. And we're different people anyway, right?
Right. Because
older and young, for good and for bad.
That kid was amazing.
When you stop to think what Dylan wrote, or the Beatles in their heyday, they were 27, 28, 29 years old, right?
Yeah.
I think back to when I was that age, and I'm kind of thinking, you know, I was lucky I could feed myself. And these guys are creating art for the ages.
Right. Well, okay, so we're getting close to the end of this thing, Brian. So, you know, I'm going to list your books and everything on this thing. So if anybody's interested in reading, Brian's really well known in Las Vegas. He's a well known author, and he's worked with a lot and mentored a lot of writers and coached a lot of writers, and he's very knowledgeable about this topic. What kind of advice could you give, Brian, to somebody that's like looking to break into writing, aside from calling you?
Which, by the way, I love coaching and mentoring and all that stuff. That's the next phase for the old me, you know. So number one, I mean, don't talk about writing. You can talk about writing, but write. The only thing that makes you a writer is to write, and to do it all the time. The other advice I would say is don't censor yourself. Be brutally, authentically honest. Don't worry about pissing anybody off. Don't worry about if you're going to get published, or that's what first drafts are for, is just get it all out there. You can always edit, but the things that I found that connect with readers is when I'm just laying it out, just, you know, putting it out there and gutting myself, being wide open to whatever. And I'd say, if you're not willing to do that, why bother? You know? And then finally, yeah, there's only 8 or 10 or 12 original ideas in the world for stories. Who cares? Put your own spin on it, you know? So, and those are the things that we remember. They always said with, for example, with Star Wars, it was just a wagon train to the stars, right?
Or I've heard Seven Samurai, Akira Kurosawa movie. Like, yeah. I've heard all sorts of different.
But you could make those 100 different ways and enjoy it 100 different times if it was good. Yeah. Just make it good.
Just be good.
Yeah. And the way you make it good, you know, we all start out by copying and somebody that we admire, but ultimately you've got to get beyond that and not be just an imitator. but get to the point where you are saying what you need to say the way you need to say it.
Yeah. Awesome has a lifespan. So I always tell young artists that talk to me, I say, just always try to be awesome. Just try to make sure your work is great, because it's not always going to be great.
No, and don't compare yourself to anybody else. Compare yours, like you said with Dylan, compare today's you with the younger you.
Right, yeah.
And make sure that you're better now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you're always
the
best you can be at this particular moment.
Yeah, the race is long, and in the end, you find out it's with yourself, right?
That's right.
Right. So, cool. So, thank you, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much. For me to get up on my soapbox and my platform for whatever this was.
But that's fantastic. And it's nice talking to you about stuff other than work.
I love it. It's great. And then maybe next time we'll break out the guitars.
Yeah, guitars, maybe some beers.
And then we won't have one viewer.
No, I would advise people not to.
No.
We will have a good time, and that's all that matters.
That's what matters.
All right, thanks, man.
Alex. I'll talk to you soon.